episode 287, Storm Suppression. Hello and welcome. Glad you could join me. Hope you're all doing okay. Hope you've not been unduly upset by the COVID. Seems quite a big talking point. And I think some of this podcast will cover something that I've noticed that I think could be quite interested, connected to the lockdown, when a lot of us have been staying at home from about March, and it's August now, and certainly I'm actually based in Dublin in Ireland, and I can certainly see that things are starting to move again. People are going into work more. There is still quite a high proportion of people who actually work from home, that sort of thing. Just carrying out a very unscientific test, looking out my office window, I can see a considerable, shall we say, amount of space available on the road. So basically there's not as many cars parked in driveways or on the road itself. Just looking out now, I'd say probably in the last few weeks, there's been maybe 80% less cars outside. So a lot of people have returned to work, and obviously, they might be finding things a little bit difficult now compared to how it was before the pandemic, all the precautions that have to be taken. But anyhow, certainly where I live, there's a lot of people who are actually going into the office now, or going to the place of work, wherever that may be. Obviously, big multinationals like the company that I work for, work from home, so which has its problems. But anyhow, storm suppression. I've spoke at length over quite a few podcasts about how humans can and it's been proven they can change the weather. Specifically talking about experiments that have been done, I know, in Russia and also in the US. So basically, you take a cloud that's full of rain, it's ready to rain, and you then introduce usually a powder of some sort. I think the Russians were using cement. I'm not quite sure that's the sort of powder you should be putting into a cloud, into the environment. But essentially it makes the cloud burst, I think, and you get a rainfall, So it is possible, in very simple terms, you can make it rain basically, but you do need a cloud there already, And the other scenario that I did, it was a hypothesis more than anything, and it related to, hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever you would like to call them, that approach the US, from the Atlantic Ocean, and they usually have a path, and hopefully they don't hit landfall. That's a bad scenario, but obviously, if you can in some ways stop them from making landfall and causing a lot of destruction on land, that'd be it'd be fantastic. So there was a theory that if we could change the surface temperature of the sea in the path of the hurricane, tornado, whatever, that you could actually cause it to deviate from its path, which is a fantastic idea. But in practice, it would involve quite a lot of equipment, I think, over a large area. I think the difference in temperature doesn't have to be much. We're only talking a few degrees. But I think it's possible that you can actually alter the course of a storm. But like I say, it has to be over many thousands of square miles, which sort of makes it prohibitive. Maybe it's the sort of thing that Elon Musk might have a look at now. He's never let a technical challenge get in his way. But can you imagine the impact you could have? I mean, the rain one is a little bit, maybe, it's a parade, or it's you're making a movie, or I don't know, something trivial. You can make it rain where you want it to rain, whatever. I don't see a huge human benefit to that, except maybe if it was going to be some form of monsoon, maybe, and you made it rain over the sea and not over land. Maybe there's something there. Or if you needed a clear sky for something, rocket launch or something, maybe there's something there. Being able to sort of direct or divert a storm or a tornado is quite exciting, though, I think, in many ways. Maybe it's something that should be explored more. When you just see of the human impact, of these events, as they make landfall, and obviously on the human level and also on the economic level as well, causing large amounts of destruction. So yeah, it'd be quite exciting if we could come up with a way of diverting. And I think the biggest problem is the sheer scale of a storm and how big it is. So anyhow, I do a podcast about I think it was Storm Ellen that we had a few days ago. We've had another storm actually now called Storm Francis, and obviously, like I said, I'm in Dublin, so these are like European sort of wind storm events, I think they call them. So we've had two very close together within a few days of each other. From my perspective, where I am in Dublin, I had some pretty high winds, gusting winds, and a lot of rain as well. The two storms seem to merge into one. I think there might have been a bit of calm between them, but a lot of rain and a lot of wind. But nowhere near the sort of events you would get, say, in the US, and other places around the world. We have quite a mild climate in Dublin. I think we seem to do okay. We don't get much snow, but then again, we don't get much heat either. So it's been quite mild. According to my little weather station here, it's 21 degrees outside, but it's a whopping 93% humidity, and it has been raining on and off. But the humidity makes it feel a lot warmer than it is, I think. So indoors now in my office, it's 24 degrees and 50% humidity. So I'm probably not going to open the window, I don't think, and let that humidity in. So, yeah, so we've had a couple of storms there, and I found it interesting because someone did say to me, can you believe, we're on E and it's August, whereas last year it was January, we were well ahead in terms of the number of storms. And, I didn't think we hadn't had many storms in lockdown. I know we'd had some high winds, but I don't remember that many storms, so I thought, well, that's interesting, why would we not have had many storms? So I thought I'd investigate it a bit more. So I've done a bit more research since the last podcast. So basically, if we look at the previous season, so the seasons run, and this is Europe now, this is the Europe wind storms, if you like, wind-based storms. They basically run from, the season runs from September to October. So from September to October in the previous year, so September 2018 to October 2019, there's sort of a pattern to these storms. So obviously from September, say, to March, April, it's that's like your wintry type season, and then you've got June, July, August, you're back into like a summer season, So just looking at the pattern of the storms. And the period I was really interested in is between March and August. So we went into lockdown in Ireland, I think it was March the 13th. So it was around just before Paddy's Day, actually. We went into lockdown. And most countries did. I think the UK was a week later. The US was later again, I believe. But and some countries had been in lockdown slightly earlier as well. But it was around March time. So I thought I'd have a look at the previous storm seasons. I was looking at March 2019. Right up until, I suppose, the end of the season, and I noticed that there was 4 storms occurred between the middle of March and basically June. I think it was around the beginning of June. There was 4, so that covers the period when we've been in lockdown this season, this year. And then there was no more storms recorded, and this is official storms. There would have been, minor storms, but these are ones that would be recorded. They're of a certain magnitude. And then there wasn't anything significant until October. So there was basically nothing for July or August, basically, in the last season. So there you go, that was fine. So then I thought, look at this year. Fast forward to this year. So basically, we in March, between March and August, up until the last 2 storms, we'd had none. We'd had no storms. So we'd had 4 between March and June last year, and then nothing until October. But this year, we've had nothing. We've had nothing in March, April, May, June, July, and only just now had 2 storms, which I find quite incredible in some ways. Now, don't get me wrong, you do get gaps of a month or two. There seems to be some variability, but predominantly the storms occur between September, and June, July, So what seems to have happened this year, we've had none during lockdown, basically. And as lockdown has been eased, this is the hypothesis now. This is purely me coming up with an idea. So basically, during lockdown, we had no major storms recorded. And, in August, so the beginning of August, really, we started coming out of lockdown. The UK is the same. Parts of Europe were the same as well. Maybe they're a bit ahead coming out of lockdown and they've sort of gone back into some sort of lockdown. But just looking from a UK Ireland perspective, this part of Western Europe. So there was no storms until Storm Ellen a few days ago, and so lockdown was coming. We was coming out of it sort of August, beginning of August. We're not fully out of it, but like I was saying earlier, it's obvious that people are back into work again. I can see that just looking out the window, all the rest of it. So we sort of have some level of normality now, So it's interesting. So why, during a period when the majority of people on the planet were in lockdown, shall we say, and certainly this part of the world, if we just think about Europe, Western Europe, why we didn't have as many storms? So I mean, there's all sorts of things I could think of that might be the reason. So my understanding is storms usually to do with temperature, aren't they, and heat and energy, and I think the rotation of the Earth has some impact as well. Because you have it's a jet stream, isn't it? So, as the Earth turns, it's dragging this big weighty chunk of atmosphere with it. And, the higher up you go, you get to a certain height and it's sort of lagging behind a little bit, and that's, can give you a bit of a push. If you go in the right direction on a plane, it gives you a little bit of a push there, If you go in the wrong direction, it adds an extra hour to the journey, But, so there's the jet stream's an interesting thing, because I think that can move, storms around. That's the first thing. I don't believe that would have changed a lot during lockdown. In my mind, I'm thinking, is there something, less vibrations on the Earth? Has that affected the rotation of the Earth and maybe slowed it down a bit and caused the less of it? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know when there was the number of flights across the Atlantic had reduced so much. It's hard to know, if there had been any impact to the jet stream. Then there's another thing. There's another interesting thing in terms of, I just mentioned it then, planes. I know there's lots of theories about, the trails, the jet. I don't know what you want to call them. You call them contrails, jet trails. Obviously there is some gases, exhaust gases that come out of the back of a jet engine. They're not completely clean burn, are they? So there is that. That would have reduced by a huge amount during lockdown, just because there were very few flights, just cargo flights and nothing else. And the other thing, of course, as well, is the pollution map. If you look at a pollution map of, say, China and the most polluted places in the world, and even across Europe, the cities that are badly polluted. When we went into lockdown, these just dropped. Like, it was incredible. They were clear skies, and even in the US, in California places, it was amazing. Like the difference it had, on the air quality. So I could say it was just normal variability. The fact that we hadn't had any storms during lockdown, or I could say, yeah, we definitely had an impact. But I'm sort of thinking somewhere in the middle. Maybe the weather conditions were such that, it wasn't conducive to lots of big storms in this part of Europe, definitely. And, it's the criteria that makes a storm, the high winds and whatever. Or maybe, there has been an impact, hasn't there? I think humans have had an impact. And I'm sort of that way of thinking, it was lovely to see places with very little pollution and stuff like that. And as much as I didn't like to see empty streets and no signs of civilization, it does make you wonder the sort of impact it has on the weather. When you think, we actually didn't have any storms for the whole of lockdown, and now as we come out of lockdown, we've had two within a few days of each other. It's fascinating stuff, and if you've got any ideas of what it might be, feel free to put it in the comments below. And as usual, like and subscribe. That seems to be the thing you have to do when you're online these days.